Hi students, today we're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing integers. And this sign means and. Now, multiplying and dividing integers is actually pretty easy because all you have to do is memorize a set of rules. And the rules are the same for multiplication and addition. So here are the rules. A positive times a positive equals a positive. A positive divided by a positive is a positive. Okay, so it's the same whether it's multiplication or division. Now, this one's kind of weird, and I can show you why down the road, but a negative times a negative equals a positive. And a negative divided by a negative also equals a positive, because remember the rules are the same for multiplication and division. So a negative divided by a negative is a positive, or a negative times a negative is a positive. So when I was a kid and I was learning this, I kind of thought about it like the negatives were canceling each other out to make it positive again. So you'll have to kind of see what works for you to try and memorize these rules, okay? And then a positive times a negative is a negative, or a negative times a positive is a negative. So if one is positive and one is negative, the answer is always negative. And that's the same for division. A positive divided by a negative is a negative, or a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So these are the rules, and they're very simple, and I'll have you, what I would like you to do is write this out on a piece of paper, I think. In your sketchbook, you could do it artsy, you could decorate it, or you could do it on a plain piece of paper, you could do it on your quad book, your spiral, your paper. I would like you to write this out somewhere. Okay, so pause and do that for me. You're gonna write multiplying and dividing integers, and you're gonna write this set of rules out for multiplication and this set of rules out for division, and remember that they're exactly the same. I just wrote them out once with multiplication and once with division. Okay. Okay, guys, you should have paused and written out these rules, but let's do some practice now. So all I'm going to do is write out some problems and then remind myself of the rules as I go through them. So I could do -4 times -7. I could do 8 divided by -1. I could do 20. Let's do -20 divided by -5. And let's do -20 times -5. And then I'm going to write some of these a little different. Let's do, how about 4 divided by -2? And how about 3 times -4? And how about -6 times -8? Okay, so first I have 4 times 7. So first I'm going to say, okay, well, what's 4 times 7? I know that that is 28. And then I'm going to say it's a negative times a negative. And I remember that a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, so this is just going to be 28, positive 28. And all I have to do is write 28. Okay, next. 8 divided by -1. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to ignore the signs actually, and I'm going to say 8 divided by 1 is 8. Okay, so I know the answer is 8, but now I've got to figure out if it's positive or negative. 8 is positive here because there's nothing here, so positive 8 divided by a -1. And I remember that a positive divided by a negative is negative, so I'm going to add a negative sign. And that is my answer, -8. Okay, next I have -20 divided by -5. You know, the other thing I could do is I could say, okay, 20 divided by or a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So I'm going to put a positive sign here to remind myself it's positive. And then I'm going to do 20 divided by 5. And this is where, if you've got one of those simple calculators, you can use a calculator, but you need to know how to do the negatives or the positives, the signs. So you could use a calculator to do 20 divided by 5, but you need to know that negative divided by a negative is a positive. Now, I know 20 divided by 5 in my head, it's 4. Now, I could leave it like that. I could write positive 4. Yeah, I guess I will. Yeah, I'll leave it with a positive sign. I don't usually do that, but positive 4. It's perfectly fine to do that. We just, a lot of times when something's positive, we don't even write the positive sign. Okay, next I've got a negative times a negative. And so again, I know that my answer is going to be positive. And then I'm going to say 20 times 5. Oh, I know what that is, but you might not. You might need to use a calculator. So first of all, you know that a negative times a negative is positive. And then if you want, you can use a calculator to do 20 times 5. I do know it because, I'm 38 years old. I've been doing this a while. And it's 100. Wouldn't it be funny if I got it wrong right there? That would be funny. So I have a negative 20 times a negative 5 equals a positive 100. And I know that that might seem weird. It's my experience that the best way to do things is to learn the rules and then learn why. And so I know it might feel weird right now that a negative times a negative is a positive, but I'll show you. Okay, later. Okay, next I have 4, positive 4, divided by negative 2. So I've got a positive divided by a negative. So the answer I know is going to be a negative because a positive divided by a negative is a negative. And then 4 divided by 2 is 2, so it's going to be negative 2. And next I have 3 times negative 4. So a positive times a negative is a negative. And then 3 times 4 is 12. And lastly, I have a negative 6 times negative 8. A negative times a negative is a positive. And 6 times 8 is 48. So normally what I would do is I could leave that positive sign, or I might erase it and just put 48. Okay, so that's some practice. I do want to just encourage you that it just takes time to memorize these rules. You just have to memorize these rules, and it just takes practice. So remember that a positive times a positive equals a positive, obvi. And a positive divided by a positive equals a positive. So just that's any kind of multiplication or division we did before we started doing integers, before we started using negative numbers. 2 times 2 equals 4. So a positive times a positive equals a positive. 4 divided by 2 equals 2. Positive divided by a positive equals a positive. So that's just what you've been doing your whole life up until we started working on integers. But now we got to start talking about negatives. So remember that a negative times a negative equals a positive, and that a negative divided by a negative also equals a positive. And that's kind of weird. I know that feels weird, but I'll show you why down the road. And then remember that if it's one positive and one negative, no matter of the order, it's negative. So a positive times a negative equals a negative. A positive divided by a negative equals a negative. And a negative times a positive equals a negative. And a negative divided by a positive equals a negative. Okay? So you should have written these down, have them next to you, while you do the practice. And to memorize this, it just takes practice, practice, practice. Okay. Good work. Thank you. Gracias and shukran.